Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be sailing out in the Tier 7 Russian cruiser known as the Shchors in a Tier 7 standard battle on the map Haven. We are joined today by our good friend Z, who is sailing out in the Tier 7 American aircraft carrier known as the Ranger, and for reference both of our ships are in stock configuration in terms of their modules. The purpose of today's gameplay is for me to articulate my first impressions on this Russian cruiser, whereby I've been waiting to get it for a very long time, having spent a gradual amount of time every couple of weeks building up the experience on the Budyonny, the Tier 6 ship before the Shchors. And I must say, ladies and gentlemen, I really have enjoyed this ship so far, and you're going to see my best game in it to date. Now, some things to note straight away. There is a perception perhaps that the Shchors is just a much larger Budyonny with one extra turret, and I can see where you're coming from. But when we say this is a much larger ship, it's huge, folks. It's got a 900 metre turn circle radius, and as you can see on the screen, it's big for a light cruiser. Which means a big ship, a big target, and that's something you're going to have to get used to. Especially seeing as you don't have big armour, you have small armour, 16 to 75mm of which on your stock hull. In order to be able to fire all four of your turrets, you do have reasonable gun arcs, but you will have to expose some of your broadside, and that means you're exposed to potentially picking up citadels, especially from battleship armour piercing. And with only 27,900 health as seen here, we can lose that health rather rapidly if we're not careful. So what you're going to see throughout this game, I'm a little bit hesitant to overcommit until I know, or I feel very confident I can get into that forward position and deal with the damage. And when we move near land masses, we're very wary of our turn circle radius and our 9.9 second rudder shift with the stock hull and the rudder shift module upgrade. So therefore we're going to be sailing parallel to the land masses, or measuring our speed and always keeping an eye on what's to our left and what's to our right. What's to port, what's to starboard. So that way, if we do find ourselves having to travel between two land masses, we're not going to crash into them, and if any enemy destroyers are sending torpedoes our way, we've got our bow towards those torpedoes as best as we can to avoid taking them or only take one. So we've got to be careful in where we go. But as we're in the open sea at the moment, as we make our way southwestwards, we trigger our spotting plane and extend our range from 15.2 kilometres, which is acceptable, out to 18.3 kilometres, and that means we can rinse and repeat what we love to do in the Budyonny, as last featured on the channel, may be seen using the link in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now, and that is deal out long range harassment damage using our high explosive, and bringing into that the 12% fire chance you have per high explosive shell, and the maximum high explosive shell damage of 2,200, you can chip off a nice amount of health from enemy battleships early on in the game, as we're doing right here. Now what with the Fuso briefly targeting us, we decided to sail away and get out of range, just for the time being. And here we make a bit of a fluff up, whereby Z's got a load of enemy aircraft going towards him. We turned away from those aircraft, meaning we can't use our defensive AA consumable accordingly to help defend him from the bombing run. And I'll take that one down to poor play on my part. But we'll make amends for it later, hopefully. And as we can see, whilst we do have 5km AA range thanks to our 6 100mm dual purpose cannon, they're not in range to bring down these aircraft, and as we try to come about to intercept these aircraft on their retreat, we still do not get into range. Bit unfortunate, but Z's going to survive for now and make it towards the end of the game, and all his planes will still be available for fighting, which is a good sign. In the meantime then, having talked a little bit perhaps about the negatives of the Shchors and started to talk about the positives in terms of the guns, what else is there to note? Well, 4 triple artillery pieces with 129 metres of dispersion at 15.2 kilometres is very nice. These are accurate guns. They're rail guns as well, what with their initial muzzle velocity of 950 metres per second upon firing, with both armour piercing and high explosive. And that means that when you're close to enemy ships, such as this Mitsuki, only 5 kilometres away, you really don't have to worry about giving too much lead, even against the fastest of ships. And because of your flat gun arcs, it means that you can very quickly get the shells onto target once they expose themselves from behind land masses. We weren't able to fire that Mitsuki whilst they were hidden behind the landmass, compared to perhaps some of the more floaty shells on the likes of American cruisers and American destroyers. Therefore we are a little bit constricted here, and we're a little bit too close to be able to shoot over land masses, but as this Nicholas exposes their broadside to try and torpedo us, we deal in a hefty 5k damage salvo, and we're turning our bow in towards them, being able to fire with 3 of our 4 turrets, so you can see those good gun arcs already coming into place. And that Nicholas is pretty much out of the game, as we even score a secondary hit and finish them off for our first kill and first blood. And note there how we were prepared for the potential torpedoes coming from that Nicholas, turning our bow in early and cutting our speed. So trying to think ahead is always good, and it's going to bode well in this ship. As one destroyer's gone and the Mizuki's starting to retreat, Z sending his fighters up to spot the Mizuki, a brilliant play by him here to make sure the Mizuki cannot get away. Now, not from myself, and as we can see the flat shell arcs there really holding us back in hitting the Mizuki, but instead our Shchors is going to pursue. And thanks to Z's fighters being overhead, that Mizuki, when they send their torps will be spotted very early on, and our Shchors will not have to worry about taking them. They can dodge them easily. In the meantime then, as we just come to a standstill for a little bit, well, not a standstill, quarter speed, let's talk about that top speed of 35.5 knots. It's a pleasure, whereby you can get up to that speed rather rapidly, and on top of that, at 35.5 knots you can cover a lot of ground. And that means you can make some rather bold plays as we're about to, with those two tier 5 enemy destroyers out the game. Because we've seen a Fiji all the way up in the northeast section, I should say, of the centre of the map, and we want to help intercept them, as they're making their way through and could pose a key threat to our destroyers up in the north, and on top of that our carriers. I.e. we haven't just got Z on our team, we've also got a friendly Ryujo, which is further up into the northwest corner of the map. But here we are detected, and this bold play may cost us. We're just going to have to find out, we're just going to have to hold on, with our detectability by sea being 12.9 kilometres and by air 8.1 kilometres. And do keep in mind I only have 2 captain skills on the ship, folks, as we're briefly undetected, whereby I've got priority target and on top of that adrenaline rush. No other skills so far, although I will be integrating concealment expert into this ship. The enemy ships do not appear to be targeting us, they're more focused on our Shchors. And whilst we should have loaded armour piercing here to rip apart the Budyani, we fire in high explosive shells instead, and we still get decent damage, although this is a misplay, especially with the Budyani exposing pretty much a full broadside at this point. So apologies for that. And our Shchors there does make the Budyani pay, and we do some decent damage to them. But now we load armour piercing because we're ready to catch the Fiji on a broadside. And what if our armour piercing citadel damage being 3,300 per shell, we're going to try and cripple that Fiji as much as possible. Aiming in, opening fire. As we can see, 2 citadels scored, 8,500 damage, and the Fiji's having to contend with all those torpedoes coming in, and we switch to high explosive to finish them off. Now, one nice thing to note about the reload time of the ship is that it's 8 seconds, which means you can very quickly get salvos coming out as we pick up our second kill. And therefore you get this continuous stream of fire, and when you do have to change shells, as we saw there, it's not a problem, even without the intuition skill, i.e. the shell swap skill. But now that we've loaded high explosive once again, we're reversing in the general direction of the enemy Gneisenau and Shchors combination, because we want to angle our hull towards them to try and minimise the chance of them hitting us with their armour piercing shells and scoring citadels. So we're angling as best as possible, being in a way out in the open here, and then we zoomed in to make sure we can adjust our lead to get the best possible salvo on the Gneisenau, as our Shchors pushes up as well, scoring a fire on the Gneisenau by 12% fire chance, which is absolutely lovely as standard. It means we can keep putting fires on enemy ships. Another salvo goes in, another 2,000 damage, and the Gneisenau throws in a salvo, scoring 1 hit, damaging one of our lead turrets, knocking it out temporarily. And we're not going to repair that, we're just going to live with it. And here, we're starting to go forward once again. We want to get out of here now, with the enemy Gneisenau in a smoke screen and the enemy Shchors being hidden behind it, although they are being detected by Mizuki. Fortunate we are there. And the enemy Gneisenau throws in another salvo, and does not land any hits, although actually they do appear to land one hit, bounces off of us, and the Shchors even aims towards us here, and we're running for it, angling all the way to get away, and we're only going to take some light damage from their 283mm cannon. As we break away, note how we're doing consistent damage still. We do not have IFHE, we're still getting the damage out, and thanks to that reload we can keep picking off their health gradually. And at this point we're going to make amends for our misplay earlier, where we didn't defend Z's carrier, by getting close to it now. Although Z's going to have to live with the fact that Gneisenau is targeting him, and it's going to throw some armour piercing shells his way shortly. Now, outside of the guns, you also have to be aware of the fact you do have torpedoes. You're not going to see those employed here because they've only got 4 km range. And whilst they do 15,100 damage maximum, and on top of that have a speed of 70 knots, they're really last-ditch attempt torpedoes in my personal opinion if you want to rush someone or if you really feel cagey and want to ambush an enemy ship. But most of the time it's going to come down to the guns, or at least in my experience so far. And they're 2 triple launcher torpedoes, 1 to each side. And here we're just gradually cutting to Nice out, using our torpedoes to tell us which way they're going, using the lead indicator there to find out they're reversing, and we score another fire. And what with them having put out a fire early on, this means we can really start to build up the bleed damage. Not with just 1 fire, but multiple, as we're hoping to achieve. And we use our defensive AA here to make sure Z's bombers, or what's left of them, make it home with those enemy fighters going down. His fighters working hard on another squadron of enemy fighters. Trying to keep our friends' planes intact. And our AA is not too great. With our maximal ring, i.e. the 5 km ring, doing 17 damage per second, the mid-range 3.5 km doing 24 damage per second, and the short-range 1.2 km ring doing only 20 damage per second. But still, it's something, and we can use it as best as we can. As we start to creep around towards the enemy Nizow, who's put out the fire once again, and we start to throw in salvo after salvo. And now that we've got them bow on, they appear to be reversing at a slight angle. We can get in a lot of accurate salvos here. 1 fire already, and the fire chance is only going to help us more and more. As we creep our way across the centre of the map, a second fire lit now. Their health is going to start bleeding astronomically, and there's not going to be much left of them in the near future. And as we can see, thanks to the accuracy of our guns, we can just keep throwing in salvo after salvo and expect a reliable amount of damage, especially once we've got the right lead on the target. Using the torpedo lead indicator to tell us where they're going once again and to adjust our lead as we set a 3rd fire. And now our damage is just soaring at this point, and the health that Nizow is just disappearing. A 4th fire, they're burning to pieces. This is lovely to see. And they've got so little health left as they start to go forward, dodging the torpedoes that are coming in from our destroyers by the looks of things. And as they start to go broadside to us, we can bring in the armour piercing and do the more consistent and higher levels of damage on the broadside. But they've only got 6,500 health left, and it's decreasing at an exponential rate, which means we don't have to worry about it. Because if our shells aren't going to kill them, the fires will, as we throw in our final salvo of high explosive, being a little bit cheeky, to pick up an arsonist achievement and our 3rd kill. Now the enemy Nizow out of the way and the enemy team pretty much torn a cinder at this point, we're just going to make our way towards the enemy capture point. And again we can see how that 35.5 knot top speed means we can very quickly go from being at longer ranges to closing in the engagements once again. Alternatively, we can sit back and recover, just spend a little bit of time undetected and then get back into the fight. We're not out of it for too long, and we have the spotter plane to make up for our lack of range with our lack of upgrades. But here the enemy Mayhan is spotted by our friendly Mitsuki. The 2 are going to go head to head, and we would expect that the Mayhan is going to beat the Mitsuki in a knife fight, with the Mayhan being 2 tiers higher and on top of that being the superior ship for bringing down destroyers at close range by comparison. But we're going to try and turn the fight on its head, throwing in 1 salvo and completely missing, just falling a little bit short, so we throw in a subsequent salvo. Hopefully this will be a little bit more accurate. There we go, nice 2,000 damage. Making sure to keep an eye on the enemy Fuso in case we need to hit them, although they do take a good number of torpedoes from Z's torpedo bombers, and that looks like it's the end of them. We're going to let Z's flooding take it out. There we go, good job Z. And now we're looking back towards this enemy destroyer once again, and note how we can't fire because of the landmass in front of us, the railgun shell arcs being a problem at this point rather than an enjoyment factor. So it comes and goes, we have to expect that. But here, now that we're into a more sufficient space, we can really start to land the damage. A nice 3,700 damage salvo there. The Confederate award also picked up, and we can just keep tearing into this Mayhan. And notice how we're going to start adjusting our speed accordingly, because we know they're broadside to us, which means they're probably going to be throwing their 9.2 km torpedoes at us very shortly. And in fact, Z's fighters even spot them for us nice and early. We can slam on the brake, turn in towards them, and that way dodge them as we finish off the Mayhan for our 4th kill. And now it's Kraken time, and there's the enemy Ranger. It'd be sweet if we could take them out. So we start to throw our salvo in, not realising how quickly they're going. It catches us by surprise a little bit. That high explosive salvo provides us with the knowledge of what lead we need to give. And now we start to throw in our armour piercing, which will hopefully score some citadels. and it looks as though the enemy carrier is more obsessed on bringing down our battleships than bringing us down at this point with their bombers. Can't complain about that. As we pick up one salvo, we pick up the high caliber achievement as well, and we're just going to lob in armour piercing salvo after salvo, turning broadside here to bring all 4 triple turrets into play. Oh, this is lovely to watch. And it was lovely at the time playing it as well. You can just keep firing in salvo after salvo. And what the small amount of damage we picked up, that also means our reload has dropped a little bit. Now it's 7.7 seconds rather than 8. We're just building up that damage. 4 citadels in play there. Aim a little bit too far forward as we pick up another citadel. Really should be aiming towards the rear of the enemy ship. And now we just need one more salvo to finish them off for the Kraken. Here we go. Lobbing in that armour piercing. Kraken achieved. 5th kill in the bag. The enemy dive bombers are now coming in to try and do some damage to us. We've got defensive AA up. We're going to stop them from hitting us. Unfortunately not, as they score 2 fires and do a considerable amount of damage to us. But now we can use our defensive AA and the fact that those bombers are going to sit over the top of us just to rack up some aircraft kills. And with that, pretty much, that is the end of the game, because unfortunately we won't have the ability to get to the enemy Cleveland in time. But as we can see here, with the bombers hanging over us, the AA does a reasonable job over time, but we shouldn't rely on the AA to defend us. We'll use the defensive AA consumable to spread out the pattern, but this is not an anti-aircraft cruiser, or at least in its stock configuration, and without an anti-aircraft spec captain. So are there any other real things to note about this ship's statistics before this game comes to its end? Not really, to be honest, but hopefully we've seen how this ship is a very nice ship, and if played in a measurable manner, can achieve a very decent output. And we look to the horizon now to see the enemy Cleveland being attacked by these torpedo bombers by looks of things. They're going in against the anti-aircraft cruiser. They're being brave. Will they get it? Maybe. Seems to be down to its last legs. There we go. Game over. Post-game stat time. A rather pleasant win in the end then. We can see that our battle performance consisted of 158,664 HP of damage, containing 244 main battery hits, 5 aircraft shot down, 7 incapacitations, 5 ships destroyed, 12 fires set, 9 citadel hits, and a single secondary battery hit. We also picked up 5 achievements. Firstly, Arsonist, which was on the enemy Gneisenau, whereby, in destroying them, we used fire to whittle down over 40% of their total health pool. We also picked up the Confederate, whereby we damaged at least 6 enemy ships. The damage caused to each ship must exceed 20% of their normal health pool. We picked up the Kraken Unleashed, for in a single battle destroying 5 or more enemy ships. First Blood, for being the first player to destroy an enemy ship in battle. That was on the enemy Nicholas. And finally, to round it all off, the High Caliber, for damaging at least 4 enemy ships, whereby the damage caused must exceed 30% of the total health pool of all the ships in the enemy team. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we were well out in front of our team in terms of base experience earned, 2,725, almost double that to second place. Now by no means did we carry our team, but instead we used the strengths of our Shchors to our advantage, and wherever possible we were raining down a continuous stream of damage from our 152 main battery cannon. We should note that we had the opportunity to do significant damage to 3 of the enemy team's destroyers, in 2 cases pretty much ripping apart all of their health pools, and that would have been a major influence in terms of picking up so much experience. And add to that, pretty much knocking out a huge chunk of the enemy Gneisenau's health and eliminating the enemy Ranger, and we can really see what our base experience built up. Looking at our detailed report, we have 2 key items to note here. The more explicit one is in terms of damage we dealt through fires, whereby we set 12 and did a total of 38,384 damage, thereby using our 12% fire chance on our high explosive shells to maximum possible effect. The less obvious item is in terms of the number of enemy ships we hit, 9 out of the 12 on the enemy team, or 3/4. Now the point of this, it goes to show how whilst the Shchors does have quite effective range even when stock, we used our manoeuvrability in terms of our speed to move across the map rather than constrain ourselves just to the western and southern side, and therefore we're able to bring our guns into play against multiple foes across the battlefield rather than down one particular line. And that's why the key strengths I feel to this ship is the fact that when you bring in the manoeuvrability and the range and use that as a purpose to relocate and redistribute your damage output, you can really go a long way in making the difference for your team. And last but not least, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away with 320,708 silver credits and 6,132 experience for our commander. To conclude, as far as first impressions go, the Shchors feels a really complete package compared to my experience on the Budyonny. It feels as though the Budyonny was 66% of the way there, with 66% of its armament being concentrated towards the front of the ship and the final 33%, i.e. the final triple turret, being at the back. And therefore you needed to expose some broadside in order to deliver all 9 guns on target. And it felt in a way a bit of a 50-50 whether you wanted to do that, because the firepower gain wasn't too significant. But in the Shchors, on the other hand, it really feels as though there's a purpose to exposing some broadside and using your decent firing arcs on your XY turrets to bring 12 guns into play. And when you double up that firepower, you can really make the difference in terms of the damage output over the course of a game. And what with the ship's speed, not its manoeuvrability in terms of rudder shift or turn circle, but just its outright speed. When you feel bold enough, you can make a play, change up your position on the map, relocate and fire once more, keeping the damage output up, whether it be for armour piercing shells, high explosive shells, or just the fires you set and the health you whittle down. And the Shchors is a ship I'm definitely going to be investing more time into and getting it fully upgraded and bringing another gameplay to the channel in the near future. And so I've been TX141. And if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.